My daughter? She's a drifter, dropped out of college and just disappeared into the system. That was my father on local television, smiling into the camera like he'd said something clever. I watched the clip on my phone, standing in the parking lot of a facility I can't name, in a part of Virginia that doesn't appear on most maps. The blue light of the screen cut through the dark. I tasted metal, not from the screen, from memory, from a road outside Fallujah where I held a man's femoral artery shut with 2 fingers while mortar rounds turned the sky white. My name is Greer Calloway. I'm 36 years old. And my father just told 40,000 local viewers that I'm a cautionary tale. He doesn't know what I actually do. He never asked. He never will. But someone else was watching that broadcast, someone who remembers my hands, someone who remembers the heat. They don't know that yet. I grew up in Jasper County in South Carolina, the kind of place where your last name carries more weight than your resume. The Callaways owned the biggest auto auction in 3 counties. Burt Calloway, Commissioner Calloway, the man who shook every hand at every Rotary breakfast and made sure the room knew the price of his watch before he sat down. Growing up in the Calloway household meant earning affection like rent, and the currency was visibility, trophies, diplomas, framed certificates on the wall. My sister Sarah had them. Real estate license at 24. Top seller in her office by 26. Her photo sat on the mantle in a silver frame next to a shot of Bert shaking the mayor's hand. I was the intense child, too quiet, too precise, too hard to impress. I enlisted the week after high school graduation. I remember the morning, 5:15, the cab idling in the driveway. My father didn't come downstairs. My mother had died 2 years before. Sarah was asleep. I left a note on the kitchen counter next to the coffee pot. It said, "Going to MEPS. Will call when I can." I didn't look back. What they didn't know, what I never explained, was that the girl who left that kitchen would spend the next decade learning how to keep men alive with nothing but gauze, surgical tubing, and a voice steady enough to talk a 19-year-old through the worst moment of his life. Navy Hospital Corps School, then Field Medical Training Battalion, then the thing that changed everything, Fleet Marine Force qualification, Greenside, the only Navy personnel who earn the right to wear Marine combat insignia. Because we bleed with them, we carry them, we cut into them when no surgeon is coming and the helicopter is 40 minutes out, and 40 minutes is a death sentence. I became an independent duty corpsman, an IDC. The Marines had a different name for us: Devil Doc, 4 combat tours, 23 field surgical interventions, Fallujah, Helmand Province, places where the sand tasted like copper and the air smelled like burning diesel, and the silence between explosions was the loudest sound you'd ever hear. But back home, Bert had already written the story. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd rewritten me. The narrative was simple. Greer couldn't hack it. Greer dropped out of community college. I never attended community college, not for a single day, but Bert said it so many times at so many Rotary Club breakfasts that it became fact. Greer drifted. Greer disappeared into the system. Greer couldn't handle the pressure of a real degree. He told it at Thanksgiving. He told it at church fundraisers. He told it to Sarah until she stopped questioning it, until the family had a cautionary tale they could point to over green bean casserole and feel better about themselves. I stopped trying when Sarah graduated college. I was in Helmand Province, Operation Moshtarak. I missed the ceremony because I was performing a chest decompression on a Marine Lance Corporal whose lung had collapsed from blast concussion. Bert called that irresponsible drifting. He told the story at Sarah's graduation dinner. Apparently, the whole table laughed. I found out 6 weeks later, standing in a forward operating base, reading an email from my sister that said, Dad told everyone you were probably waitressing somewhere. I didn't correct him. Sorry. That was it. No defense. No warmth. Just an apology shaped like permission. After 13 years of active combat duty, I transitioned. Not out, not home. Deeper. At 31, I moved into classified medical intelligence. Tier 1 support for units that do not exist on paper, the kind of work where your name gets a classified stamp and your address becomes a post office box and your family gets a cover story they'll never know is a cover story. Healthcare logistics consultant, that's what I told them. A DC-based firm? Some clients preferred discretion. Bert heard logistics and translated it to paper pusher. Sarah heard consulting and translated it to couldn't find a real job. They had crafted this story carefully. The dropout, the drifter, the daughter who vanished because she had nothing to show for herself. If you've ever been underestimated by people who don't know the real story, hit that like button and subscribe. I hadn't been home in 2 years when the call came. Sarah's voice, tight, performative. Dad's hosting a dinner Friday. For the family, he wants you there. She didn't say he missed me. She didn't say he was sorry. She said he wanted me there. There's a difference. When I stepped out of the rental car in Jasper County, the air felt exactly the way I remembered. Thick with humidity and the sweet, acrid smell of my father's cigars drifting from the screened porch. Spanish moss hung from the oaks like old secrets nobody had the courage to cut down. No one was waiting. No welcome. Not even a wave from the porch. Just the blue flicker of a television screen visible through the living room window. I walked inside. The house smelled like roast chicken with rosemary, baked squash with brown sugar, cornbread so buttery it stuck to the knife. Sarah had even set the table with the good china, the set my mother used to save for Christmas. It looked perfect, just like it did every holiday, and somehow more dangerous than any forward operating base I'd ever set foot in. Family photos lined the mantel. All of them featured Sarah, her real estate award, her standing with Bert at the county fair ribbon cutting, a shot of them both in front of the auction house, grinning like the world owed them applause. Not a single one of me. And there, on the flat screen above the fireplace, playing on a loop, was Bert's interview. Morning with the County, the segment from 3 days ago. His face filled the screen, his smile wide, his voice carrying that commissioner confidence, that car lot polish. My daughter, she's a drifter, dropped out of college and just disappeared into the system. The host laughed politely. The camera cut to a wide shot. Bert leaned back, comfortable, expansive. Bert, I hear you're a family man through and through. Oh, absolutely. My youngest, Sarah, she's a firecracker. Top realtor in the county, but my oldest. He waved his hand like he was clearing cigar smoke. She's a paper pusher, drifted for 10 years on the taxpayer's dime. Couldn't hack the pressure of a real degree. The clip looped again and again. Sarah sat across from me, eyes fixed on her wine. She didn't flinch. She'd heard it before. She'd helped build it. Bert came in from the kitchen carrying a platter like a man arriving at his own coronation. He set it on the table. He looked at me the way you look at a bill you forgot to pay. Greer, glad you could make it. He pulled out his chair, the head of the table. Always. Still doing that logistics thing? Same contracts, I said. Different problems. Right. He carved into the chicken. Well, at least you're working. That's more than I expected. Sarah poured herself more wine. She didn't look at me. You know, Bert said, addressing the table like it was a rotary audience. I was telling Dave Henderson at the auction last week. I said, Dave, I've got one daughter who built something real and one daughter who just floated. He pointed the carving knife at me. Casual. Almost friendly. No offense, Greer, but you've got nothing to show for yourself. No degree, no property, no family, not even a photo from whatever it is you supposedly do all day. Even the candle flame seemed to hesitate. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate. If she truly did anything important, Bert continued, looking at Sarah now, performing for her, there'd be evidence, photos, awards on the wall, something. Instead, we've got silence. We've got a woman who can't even explain her own job at a dinner table. Sarah nodded, slowly, the way someone nods when they know the script. Denial, I would learn, was their specialty. Under the table, my left hand found my forearm, the jagged ridge of scar tissue running from my wrist to mid-forearm. Shrapnel. Fallujah. The same piece of metal that nearly severed the tendons I used to clamp a dying man's artery shut. I pressed my thumb into the scar. Hard, the way you press a bruise to remind yourself it's real. Bert leaned forward. His voice dropped, not quieter, heavier, the voice of a man who'd been rehearsing this moment for 5 years. I'm going to say something I should have said a long time ago. He looked at me. You embarrass this family, Greer. You always have. You ran off after high school. You never got a degree. You've never once brought home proof that you've done a single meaningful thing with your life. He tapped the table with his index finger, once, twice. And I'm done pretending that's okay. I didn't flinch. My hand stayed folded in my lap. My voice didn't shake. You don't have to pretend anything, Bert. It's Dad. No, I said, it isn't. The room tilted just slightly. Sarah set her glass down. Bert's jaw tightened. The television above the fireplace played his interview again, his voice filling the silence between us like a loop that couldn't find its end. He stood, slowly, the way a man stands when he wants the room to feel his height. You want to sit at my table? In my house? Then you explain yourself right now. What have you done, Greer? What do you actually do? I looked at him. I looked at the mantel behind him. The photos that didn't include me. The wall that had erased me. I work in logistics. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm permitted to give. His face went red. Not embarrassment. Rage. The quiet, simmering kind that men like Bert carry like a second wallet. He reached across the table and grabbed the remote. He rewound the clip. He pressed play. Dropped out of college and just disappeared into the system. He pointed at the screen, then at me. That's the truth, Greer. That's what I told the whole county, and unless you can prove me wrong right here, right now, that's the story that stands. Tomorrow, they'll call me something else entirely. The thing about silence is that it isn't always passive. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer. I sat still. My hand stayed folded. The television played Bert's loop above the fireplace, his voice bouncing off the good china and the cornbread and the mantle full of photos that proved I didn't exist. Sarah stared at her, wine like it held instructions. Bert stood at the head of the table, chest out, waiting for me to crumble. I didn't crumble. I reached for my glass of water, took a slow sip, set it back down. The condensation left a ring on the tablecloth. My mother would have wiped immediately. Nobody wiped it. Well, Bert said, I heard you. And I work in logistics, Bert. He slammed his palm on the table. The silverware jumped. Sarah flinched. The candle flame bent sideways and recovered. Stop saying that. Stop hiding behind that word. You've been hiding behind vague nonsense for 15 years, and I'm done accepting it. He turned to Sarah. You see this? This is what I've been dealing with. A daughter who can't even defend herself. Sarah looked at me. For just a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not sympathy, curiosity, the kind you see in someone who's spent years believing one version of a story and just caught the edge of another. Then it was gone. She looked away. Dad's right, Greer. If you had something to show, you'd show it. That's how the real world works. I didn't answer. I pressed my thumb into the scar under my sleeve. The ridgeline of shrapnel that ran from my left wrist to mid-forearm. I could feel every millimeter of it through the fabric. The same scar I'd earned in a burning street in Fallujah while holding a tourniquet so tight my fingers went white. The same scar I covered every day with professional sleeves because the people who needed to know about it already did, and the people who didn't need to know wouldn't understand it anyway. In my right pocket, my fingers found the challenge coin, worn smooth on one side, the Devil Dock insignia pressed into brass. On the reverse, the Navy Cross crest. I didn't pull it out. I didn't need to. I knew its weight the way I knew my own pulse. Bert was pacing now. The television loop had cycled 3 more times. His interview played like an anthem he'd written for himself. "You know what your problem is?" he said. "You've got no proof of anything, no diploma, no license, no property, no awards, nothing. Just a government paycheck and a story nobody can verify." He stopped pacing. He looked at me with the expression of a man delivering a verdict. "I think you washed out. I think you washed out of whatever it was you tried, and you've been living off the system ever since. And I think you know it." I held my gaze. I didn't blink. Some clients prefer discretion. Discretion. He laughed. The sound was hollow, performative. "That's a $10 word for having nothing to say." There was a knock at the door. Not loud, not soft, precise. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. The kind of knock that comes from someone who spent years approaching doors they weren't sure would open. Bert frowned. He checked his watch. Sarah looked toward the hallway. "Who's that?" Sarah asked. Bert waved his hand. "Probably Dave Henderson dropping off the auction paperwork. I'll get it." He walked to the front door. I heard the deadbolt turn. I heard the creak of hinges. I heard Bert's voice shift from annoyance to the polished commissioner register he kept for strangers. "Evening. Can I help you?" "Commissioner Calloway." The voice was calm, controlled, measured in a way that most civilians never notice, but every service member recognizes instantly. "My name is Scott Miller. I'm the executive producer at WKNT News. We spoke briefly after your segment on Morning with the County." Bert's voice warmed, the way it always did when media was involved. "Scott, of course. Come in, come in. I didn't realize you made house calls." "I don't usually." Footsteps on the hardwood. 2 sets. Bert's loafers, loose and confident. Miller's shoes, steady and deliberate. They came around the corner into the dining room. I saw him before he saw me. Scott Miller, 38. Taller than I remembered, but the way he carried his weight hadn't changed. Left shoulder slightly forward, compensating for the reconstructive surgery on his right hip. The hip I'd stabilized with a compression bandage and a piece of MRAP door panel while diesel fuel pooled around us and the sky turned orange. He wore a navy blazer, no tie. His hair was shorter than it had been at 26 when it was matted with blood and sand, and he was screaming my call sign into a radio that had already gone dead. Bert gestured grandly. "Scott, this is my family. My daughter Sarah, our county's top realtor. And that's Greer, my other daughter." My other daughter. Miller turned. His eyes swept the room the way a trained eye does. Table, exits, windows, then me. His gaze found my face, held, moved to my left arm. My sleeve had shifted when I'd reached for the water glass. Not much, maybe an inch, enough to show the lowest edge of the scar. His expression didn't change. Not at first. But something behind his eyes moved, like a gear catching after years of spinning free. He looked at my forearm, then my face, then my forearm again. "I'm sorry," he said to Bert, but his eyes didn't leave me. "You said her name is Greer?" "Greer Calloway. She works in logistics or something." Bert dropped the word like a used napkin. Miller's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. He took 1 step closer to the table. His right hand moved to his blazer pocket. I saw the outline of something there. Rectangular. Metal. The shape of a challenge coin. He pulled it out, set it on the table beside my untouched plate. Face up, the coin was identical to mine, same wear pattern. Same Devil Dock insignia, same Navy cross crest on the reverse, except his had a date stamped into the rim. November 14th, Fallujah, the date I pulled him from the MRAP. Sarah stared at the coin. She didn't recognize it. She saw brass and markings and assumed it was a business card or a promotional token. Something from the station. Something unimportant. Bert barely glanced at it. What's this? Some kind of media award? Miller didn't answer him. He was looking at me. His breathing had changed, shorter, controlled, the breathing of a man holding something back. Chief Calloway. His voice was quiet, not soft, precise, the way you speak when the words carry more weight than volume can hold. I've been looking for you for 12 years. The room stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The television loop cut to static for half a second before cycling again. The candle flame went perfectly still. Even the hiss of the central air seemed to pause. Bert's smile collapsed, not all at once, in stages. The corners first, then the eyes, then the posture, the commissioner confidence draining out of him like water from a cracked glass. Chief, he said. Sarah's wine glass slipped. It didn't shatter. It hit the edge of her plate and tipped, sending a river of red across the white tablecloth my mother had saved for Christmas. She didn't move to clean it. She didn't move at all. Miller straightened, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted, and then he did something that no one in that room, not Bert, not Sarah, not the ghost of every Rotary Club story Bert had ever told, could have prepared for. He snapped to attention, heels together, hands at his sides, a salute, crisp and formal, delivered with the precision of a man who'd spent 8 years in the United States Marine Corps and had never forgotten a single second of the training. He didn't salute Commissioner Calloway. He didn't salute Sarah. He didn't salute the television or the mantle or the photo wall or the auction plaques. He saluted me. Chief Petty Officer Calloway, Fleet Marine Force, ma'am. His voice carried through the dining room like a rifle report. Clean, final. I am alive because of you, and I am not going to stand in this room and listen to anyone call you a drifter. Bert stepped backward. His hip caught the edge of the counter. The carving knife rattled against the platter. His face had gone the color of raw steak. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Sarah's hand was on her chest. Her eyes were wide, not with understanding, not yet. With the vertigo of realizing the floor she'd been standing on for 5 years was made of paper. Miller held the salute for 3 full seconds. Then he lowered his hand. He reached into his blazer and produced a single folded document. He placed it on the table next to the coin. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, embossed with a seal I could see from across the room. This arrived at my office 48 hours ago, Miller said, from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General James Walker. It's a personal letter confirming Chief Calloway's Navy Cross nomination for actions during Operation Phantom Fury. He paused. Specifically, for pulling a wounded lance corporal from a burning MRAP under direct enemy fire, performing emergency field surgery with no surgical support, and maintaining pressure on a severed femoral artery for 11 minutes while coordinating a medevac extraction on a radio with no backup frequency. He looked at Bert. That lance corporal was me. And suddenly, 2 family members, including my father, the county commissioner, the man who'd told 40,000 viewers I was a cautionary tale, went very, very quiet. Bert's hand found the back of his chair. He gripped it. His knuckles went white. His mouth was still open. The loop on the television played his voice one more time, dropped out of college and just disappeared into the system. Miller turned back to me. His eyes were steady. His voice dropped to something private, something the room could hear, but wasn't meant for them. When they pulled me out of Landstuhl, he said, they told me a Navy corpsman saved my life. They wouldn't give me a name. They said it was classified. He swallowed. I've spent 12 years trying to find that name. And then I sat in an editing bay 3 days ago and watched your father say it into a camera. He paused. Chief Calloway, ma'am, we're here to set the record straight. Miller reached into his blazer one more time. He produced a tablet, black case, station logo on the back. He set it on the table beside the coin and the letter, and he pressed play. The screen filled with footage I hadn't seen in over a decade. Helmet cam, grainy, the color washed out by heat and dust and the limitations of equipment that was never designed to capture anything beautiful. But it captured truth. A road outside Fallujah. November 14th, the MRAP on its side, smoke pouring from the engine block, diesel pooling in the sand, and a figure small against the wreckage, dragging a body twice her size through a gap in the armor plating that couldn't have been wider than 18 inches. No surgical team, no backup, just hands and gauze and a voice you couldn't hear on the footage, but that Miller heard in his sleep for 12 years. The commandant's voice came through the tablet speakers. General James Walker recorded message. His tone carried the weight of a man who had signed too many letters to families who would never hear their children's voices again. Chief Petty Officer Greer Calloway, United States Navy, Fleet Marine Force qualified, is hereby nominated for the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat operations during Operation Phantom Fury, Fallujah, Iraq. Chief Calloway, serving as independent duty corpsman attached to 2nd Battalion, performed emergency surgical intervention under direct enemy fire on 14 November, extracting a critically wounded Marine from a disabled and burning MRAP. With no surgical support and no functioning communications relay, Chief Calloway maintained arterial compression for 11 minutes, coordinated medevac extraction on a secondary frequency, and refused evacuation until all wounded personnel were stabilized. Her actions directly saved the lives of 3 Marines. Chief Calloway's courage, composure, and clinical precision under fire reflect the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. The tablet went dark. The dining room was silent. It was not the polite silence of a family waiting for someone to pass the salt, the silence of a room that had just been turned inside out. Bert was still gripping the back of his chair. His face had gone from raw steak to something paler, gray, the color of a man watching his own story collapse in real time. His mouth moved. No words, then words, small ones. The Navy Cross. I thought you were just a clerk. Miller didn't respond to him. He was watching me, waiting. I looked at the tablet, at the coin, at the letter with General Walker's signature, at the footage of a road I still visited in dreams, where the sand tasted like copper and the sky burned orange, and a 26-year-old Lance Corporal screamed a call sign into a dead radio because he thought no one was coming. Someone came. I looked at Bert. I held his gaze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You didn't want the truth, Dad. You wanted a story that made you look big. Now you have to live with the one that makes you look small. He flinched, not from the words, from the calm, from the absolute clinical steadiness of my voice, the same steadiness that had talked a 19-year-old through a chest decompression in Helmand while mortar rounds shook the walls, the same steadiness that had held a tourniquet on Miller's leg while diesel fuel crept toward a flame I could feel on the back of my neck. Greer. I didn't know. His voice cracked. You never said. You never told us. You didn't ask. 3 words. His whole body absorbed them. He swayed slightly the way a man sways when the thing holding him up turns out to be the thing he's been standing against. I asked you what you did. I asked you 100 times. No, you told me what I did. You told the Rotary Club. You told Sarah. You told 40,000 people on local television. I paused. My hands stayed folded. You weren't asking questions, Bert. You were digging graves. Sarah was crying, quietly. The wine stain spread across the tablecloth like a map of something ruined. She opened her mouth. Greer, I'm so sorry. You should have asked too. She closed her mouth. Her hand went to the wine stain. She pressed her fingers into it like she could push it back into the glass. Miller stepped forward. His voice returned to its professional register. The producer. The man who built stories for a living and knew when one was finished. Commissioner Calloway, I want you to understand something. He placed his hands flat on the table. In 48 hours, WKNT will air a 7-minute special segment. Community Spotlight. It will feature the Commandant's letter, the helmet cam footage, my personal testimony, and a full correction of every claim you made on our broadcast regarding your daughter's service record. Bert's hand slipped off the chair. His arm fell to his side. You can't. That's my segment. I paid for that airtime. You paid for a promotional spot for Callaway Auto Auctions. You used that platform to publicly defame a decorated combat veteran. That's not a billing issue, Commissioner. That's a liability. Miller turned to me. His voice dropped again. Private. The voice of a man settling a debt he'd carried across 12 years and 2 continents. Chief, when I was in that MRAP, the radio was dead. I couldn't see. I couldn't move my legs. The smoke was so thick I couldn't tell if I was breathing air or fuel. And then I heard a voice, clear, steady, telling me to stay still, telling me she had me. He paused. You said 4 words. I've got you, Marine. That was the last thing I heard before I lost consciousness. It was the first thing I remembered when I woke up in Landstuhl. He straightened. I've got you now, Chief. The record is going to be corrected. I didn't speak. I pressed my thumb into the scar one last time. Then I released it. I stood. I picked up the challenge coin. I picked up the letter. I left the tablet on the table. Miller could handle the broadcast. I looked at the mantel, the photos of Sarah, the auction house, the county fair, the wall that had erased me for 15 years. I didn't ask them to add my photo. I didn't need to be on that wall. I had never needed to be on that wall. I'm not staying for dessert, I said. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. I walked toward the door. My shoes were steady on the hardwood, the same floor I'd crossed at 18 with a bag packed with precision and a note by the coffee pot. The same floor I'd crossed an hour ago, expecting nothing and receiving exactly that. But this time, the weight was different, lighter. Not because the truth had been spoken, because I no longer carried the silence alone. Miller followed me to the porch. The humidity pressed against my skin. The Spanish moss hung still in the dark. Chief, one more thing. I turned. When you said you coordinated medevac on a secondary frequency, I have read the after-action report. That frequency was a field improvisation. You jury-rigged a backup channel from a damaged PRC-152 using components from the MRAP's communication array. He looked at me. There were 4 communication specialists in that battalion. None of them could have done that under fire. I didn't answer. Some things don't need confirmation, he knew. I knew. That was enough. I'm trying to build something, I said. A trauma medicine fellowship for corpsmen transitioning to civilian emergency rooms. Devil docs who need a bridge between the field and the hospital. He nodded. Once. I know some people. We'll talk. The segment aired the following Tuesday. 7 minutes, the helmet cam footage, General Walker's recorded message, Miller's testimony delivered in the same measured voice he'd used in my father's dining room, and the correction. a formal on-air correction of every claim Bert Calloway had made about his daughter's service record. The clip went viral within 6 hours, not the original segment, the correction. 40,000 local viewers became 2 million national ones. The headline wrote itself. County Commissioner mocks decorated Navy veteran on air. The comments wrote themselves too. But I didn't read them. I don't measure victories in clicks. Bert's county commission seat came up for re-election 3 months later. No one ran on his ticket. Not because they opposed him, because no one would stand next to him. The auction house lost 2 of its 3 major consignment contracts within a month. Dave Henderson stopped returning his calls. The Rotary Club quietly removed him from the speaker rotation. They didn't announce it. They just stopped calling. He called me once, 3 weeks after the broadcast. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it, not contrite, confused. The voice of a man who'd spent 30 years selling narratives and suddenly found himself without a buyer. I didn't call back. Sarah sent a letter, handwritten, 2 pages. She described the wine stain on the tablecloth. She said she'd tried to wash it out 3 times and it wouldn't come. She said maybe that was the point. She asked if I'd be willing to talk sometime. Not at Bert's house, not at the auction, somewhere neutral. She signed it with her full name, Sarah Thompson, not Calloway. I haven't written back yet, not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I no longer needed to step into a place that asked me to shrink. If Sarah wanted to find me, she'd have to come to where I stand, not where Bert told her I fell. The fellowship launched 4 months later. The Calloway Trauma Fellowship, my name, my terms, 12 corpsmen in the first cohort, FMF qualified Navy Hospital corpsmen transitioning from combat medicine to civilian level 1 trauma centers. The kind of people who've performed chest decompressions in sandstorms and now need someone to teach them how to do it under fluorescent lights without the adrenaline of incoming fire. I teach there 3 days a week. The facility is new, clean. The hallways smell like antiseptic and fresh paint instead of diesel and copper. I wear my sleeves to the elbow now. The scar is visible. The jagged silver line from wrist to mid-forearm, the students see it. Some of them have their own. Nobody asks. Nobody needs to. On my desk, next to a stack of curriculum binders and a coffee mug that says, "Property of nobody, there are 2 things. The Devil Dock Challenge coin, worn smooth on one side, and a framed letter from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, signed by General James Walker, confirming my Navy Cross nomination for actions during Operation Phantom Fury. I don't keep it there for visitors. I keep it there for the days when silence feels heavier than speech. For the days when the old weight comes back and I need something solid to press my thumb against. There is power in patience. There is freedom in truth, even if it comes late. You spent 30 years selling used cars and county favors, Bert. I spent 15 years keeping better men than you from bleeding out in the dirt. And when it was over, I didn't build a mantle. I built a bridge. I work at the Calloway Trauma Fellowship now. No titles on the door, no commissioner's plaque, no photo wall, just chief, just Greer. Silence had always been the language of my life. I used to think it was a wound, a thing that had been done to me, a space where words should have been but weren't, because nobody asked and nobody listened and nobody cared enough to wonder what I wasn't saying. I was wrong. Silence was the steadiest hand in the room. It was the frequency nobody else could find. It was the voice that said, "I've got you, Marine," when the radio was dead and the sky was burning and 11 minutes felt like 11 years. Silence wasn't my weakness. It was my credential. I am no longer missing. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence, winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.